Reptile TV is brought to you by Scales and Tails. 3 Denver locations on the Front Range, also in Castle Rock, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. Visit scalesandtails.com.
Welcome back to Reptile TV. I'm Chad.
And I'm Laura.
And this is our friend Dino.
Dino is a rhinoceros iguana. They're found in the Caribbean islands, and he'll get about 2 to 4 feet long.
These guys primarily eat vegetation. These guys are actually one of the few iguanas that you can actually see jumping in the air for food, which is kind of cool. Another great thing about these guys is they have a third eye. So these guys, while they're on the ground, these guys aren't the best climbers. If a big bird of prey or something is trying to get over them, they can actually see the shadowing due to this third eye right here, which allows them to take off and avoid the situation. Another cool thing about these guys is one of their primary defense weapons is this tail. And they actually have really sharp spikes across the back, so that when they whip, they can actually scratch things up. And as further back you go, the sharper the spikes get. As where these spikes here, kind of soft, and he has more of a smooth skin, not as much of a scaly feel to him. And these guys can range in colors from grays to browns to even somewhat greens, which makes them kind of cool because each one's going to have its own little individual fingerprint. They call them a rhinoceros iguana though, due to these horns that are up here on the front of their face. These guys can typically be pretty decent pets, but they're definitely a handful. The thing I like about this one is that he just loves to be pet under his chin, as you can see as he's falling asleep. But at other times when it comes time to food, that's when he gets really lively. He will actually jump up at us and try to grab the food, and if he thinks anything looks like fruit or vegetables, well, he thinks it is food, so he tries to eat it. Earlier he was trying to eat her nail polish, which I thought was kind of funny. But these guys are pretty cool and definitely an awesome animal, and that's why we like to show them to you here on Reptile TV, so that you guys can see things that you might not even be able to see in the zoo.
This is a red iguana. It's the same species as a green iguana. It just has a really cool paint job. So iguanas live in Mexico, the Caribbean, as far south as Central and South America, and every single locality, all those different places through that range, all have a little bit different look and a little bit different color. Iguanas will get about 4 to 6 feet, so they're pretty big lizards. If you're going to have one as a pet, you need to plan on having a lot of room for it. The cool thing about iguanas is that they actually have a third eye. It's called a parietal eye, and it's right here on the middle of the top of its head, and it's just a lighter colored scale. And what they use it for is detecting motion and light and dark changes, so it keeps them safe from predators overhead. When predators do attack an iguana, they have this long tail that they use as defense. They'll use it as a whip. It's pretty powerful. It's got spikes on it.
Another great thing about these guys is iguanas are actually considered to be the second most intelligent lizard out there, which can make them kind of a handful if you don't know how you're handling them, because they sometimes will outsmart you. The good thing about these guys though is that they are herbivores, so these guys are going to eat a lot of vegetation. They love fruits, they love veggies, and that can make them a little easier to take care of for someone who doesn't want to deal with bugs or any live feeders. So these guys can make a pretty cool pet, and they're pretty readily available, so you can find these guys at almost any pet store, or for example Scales and Tails. But these guys, they're pretty cool, and I do enjoy a few things about them. A lot of times if you pet them just right, they might even give you a little kiss. Now some people, these guys actually can't digest salt, so a lot of times you'll see them sneeze and it will freak people out, but that's just them shooting salt out of their nose since they can't digest it. So if you ever see that, don't get freaked out and think that he's sick because he's shooting salt out his nose. So. Well, thank you for watching this one on Reptile TV. We'll be right back with some more.
Reptile TV is brought to you by Scales and Tails. 3 Denver locations on the Front Range, also in Castle Rock, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. Visit scalesandtails.com.
At any of our Scales and Tails locations, you can get what we use and recommend to everyone out there. Our favorite product, Zoo Med. You can get all the lighting, all the bedding, anything you need from Zoo Med. They are the best in reptile care.
We use and love Zoo Med.
Where can you go to find the best in exotic animals? Scales and tails, turtles, pythons, frogs, lizards, sugar gliders, reptiles the zoo doesn't even have, and much more. Scales and Tails is your one-stop shop, including feeders and a full line of supplies to keep your animal happy, with a knowledgeable staff to answer all of your questions. The displays at Scales and Tails are so cool, they should charge admission. Scales and Tails, where reptiles rule.
At any of our Scales and Tails locations, you can get what we use and recommend to everyone out there. Our favorite product, ZooMed. You can get all the lighting, all the bedding, anything you need from ZooMed. They are the best in reptile care.
We use and love ZooMed.
Welcome back here to Reptile TV. This guy here is a Sinaloan milk snake. Now, milk snakes are in the family of snake called colubrids. So these guys are related to corn snakes, king snakes, even bull snakes. But the great thing about these guys is you can find these here in Colorado, you can find them anywhere, all the way down through South America. Now, milk snakes are a very cool snake, actually pretty easy to take care of, don't require too much humidity, and they eat about every 7 to 10 days. Now, the good thing about this guy is that you can look at him and a lot of people will think that, well, he's a venomous snake. But there's a good way to remember the difference between this guy and a coral snake. Well, this one here, red touches black, he's a friend of Jack. He's not going to have any venom, he's going to be good to go. Now, if red touches yellow, that's kill a fellow. If you remember that, you'll always be safe when you're looking at a snake with these colors. Now, these guys I tend to like as a pet due to the fact that they're constantly wanting to move around. So they're not boring. They love to climb around, find places to hide, and just pretty docile little creatures. The other thing I like about milk snakes is that some of them stay small, but you can also get ones that can get over 6 feet. So it depends on the locality and where they're at. The way we usually keep these guys is in a decent sized tank, probably around a 20 to 40 gallon tank, and you want to use aspen bedding, which works really well, good sized water dish, and lots of places to hide. Due to the fact that they don't need super high heat, you can actually get away with a single basking light, which will actually help them out with digesting their food. Because just like any cold-blooded creature, if these guys get cold, well, they're not going to be able to digest their food and they're not going to be moving very much. So always make sure you have the right heat and the right humidity. But like I said with this one, he doesn't need a whole lot of it. Now, he just wants to go over and give her kisses. He keeps flicking his tongue. He's also looking for food. That's the great thing about these guys. They use their tongue to smell. They have what's called a Jacobson's organ. If any of you guys have a cat at home, I want you to know that your cat even has a Jacobson's organ. Oh, look at him. And then they can use their tongue to smell as well. Now, this guy, as you see the way they move, they use the bottom scales that are longer to help grip as they're slithering around. Just like any snake, these scales here are what help them get traction, so they don't have hands and legs. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. This was a Sinaloan milk snake, and we will see you here soon on Reptile TV.
Welcome back to Reptile TV. This here is a White's tree frog, or an Australian green tree frog,
Or a dumpy.
or a dumpy tree frog, which is kind of a funny name.
These guys are one of my favorite frogs. They're actually a very easy frog to keep, and they're one that can actually tolerate a little bit more handling other than some other frogs that you just don't want to handle. The cool thing about these guys is they get quite large. They can get over 4 inches, and these guys get really fat and chunky. As you can see her right there, this is a boy. Now, the one way you can tell is definitely by the eyes. As the boys get bigger, they have these big fat folds that roll over their eyes, and he'll do a lot more croaking. So the boys are definitely the vocal ones. The other thing I like about these guys is that you can do all kinds of cool environments. You can make it as simple as you want with a tank with just a little humidity, a few branches, and a big water dish, or you can get really cool with it and put some live plants in there, put a misting system in there, big plants, small plants, all kinds of things, and these guys will actually hide in there. And as you see, they're good jumpers. But the thing I like about these guys as a pet is that they are pretty good eaters. They're going to eat a lot of insects, and if you do a live tank setup like I like to do for these guys, the thing that makes it fun is that actually bugs will stand to hide in the plants, and these guys will actually hunt them down. And they're actually really good hunters, and they love to eat, mostly around beginning of morning and towards the end of night. But the frogs themselves are pretty slow moving when they're walking, but if they jump, you can see they can definitely move a little bit quicker.
So White's tree frogs will change colors from green to brown and then back to green, and that's actually in response to their environment and temperature.
And also their mood. They're kind of like a mood ring in a way. Now, these guys have a slime coating that it's always important to make sure you have clean hands and not a lot of oils on them so that when you are handling them, you're not disrupting their skin. The great thing about these guys being handled though is their slime coating's mostly on the top, so if you handle them on the bottom, they're actually a little more prone to hanging out with you and not really getting the skin irritation through it. Unlike a lot of other frogs like red-eyed tree frogs and things like that that really can't handle much handling. Now, if you guys do decide you want one of these as a pet, they're pretty reasonably priced. They're definitely a cool one. And the thing that you can do with these guys is keep them in big groups. They don't get stressed out over a lot of them. As long as you have a big enough enclosure, you can have up to 20 of these guys in the same tank, which makes them pretty social little animal, and each one is going to have a complete different personality.
They'll chirp for you all summer long.
Which makes them almost like a songbird. Hope you guys enjoyed this one on Reptile TV. We'll be back with more shortly. Welcome back to Reptile TV. I'm Chad,
I'm Laura.
and this is a redfoot tortoise.
So I've got a really cool friend here to show you today. He's from the Amazon basin, and this is a red-footed tortoise.
These guys actually can get a decent size, usually about 10 to 12 inches in overall shell length. These are also one of the few tortoises that actually enjoy swimming. Almost on a daily basis, these guys will be found swimming across rivers, which makes them a quite interesting tortoise. These guys are actually an omnivorous tortoise. They don't just eat vegetation.
They've been found in the wild eating carrion and greens and bugs and just about anything they can get their little beaks into.
Now, these guys are very closely related to the yellowfoot tortoise, which is just different locality really. The yellowfoot, redfoot, and even the cherry-headed tortoise can actually be a really cool pet. They do need a little more humidity than your average tortoise, such as a Russian tortoise or sulcata tortoise. So these guys need a little bit more moisture, and they also like to somewhat dig around. So these guys are a very fun pet. Also require a specialty lighting. UVA, UVB is definitely a must for these guys. Otherwise they'll get what's known as shell pyramiding because they can't digest the calcium to build their shell up. So you always want to make sure you have the right lighting and the right diet for these guys. These guys aren't going to eat as much grasses as your sulcatas or your Russian tortoises. These guys are going to eat more fresh leafy greens and fruits, which is pretty easy and pretty much the same stuff we like to eat.
Just a little more protein than like your sulcata tortoises.
Now, these guys, when they get big, it's a lot easier to tell if they're a boy or a girl. One way though you can tell on any tortoise really is a difference between a V and a U. This one is definitely a boy with that nice V there. The females are going to have a huge shell because they have to lay the eggs. Now the males have that nice little V and usually a dip in the shell like you can see here. So you can tell that this one is a happy little boy.
Also, the boys have a little bit longer of tails than the girls do. The girls will have really short little nubby tails and the boys will have longer tails.
And that's definitely true with other species of tortoise. It makes it a little easier to tell with like Russian tortoises. You can definitely tell by just even the tail length. Now, the fun thing about these guys is they are a slower pet, so if you don't want something that's going to try to take off on you, well, this is definitely a great place to start. With them being a little slower, they're usually not going to take off and outrun you, so these are definitely good for small kids, things like that. And one thing I always like to say is no matter what animal you have, always just make sure to wash your hands and practice good hygiene, because that way you don't get sick, they don't get sick, and it's just a smart thing to do. Well, thank you for watching this one here on Reptile TV. We'll be back in just a bit.
Reptile TV is brought to you by Scales and Tails, 3 Denver locations on the Front Range, also in Castle Rock, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. Visit scalesandtails.com.
At any of our Scales and Tails locations, you can get what we use and recommend to everyone out there. Our favorite product, ZooMed. You can get all the lighting, all the bedding, anything you need from ZooMed. They're the best in reptile care.
We use and love ZooMed.
Where can you go to find the best in exotic animals? Scales and tails, turtles, pythons, frogs, lizards, sugar gliders, reptiles the zoo doesn't even have, and much more. Scales and Tails is your one-stop shop, including feeders and a full line of supplies to keep your animal happy, with a knowledgeable staff to answer all of your questions. The displays at Scales and Tails are so cool, they should charge admission. Scales and Tails, where reptiles rule.
At any of our Scales and Tails locations, you can get what we use and recommend to everyone out there. Our favorite product, ZoomEd. You can get all the lighting, all the bedding, anything you need from ZoomEd. They are the best in reptile care.
We use and love ZoomEd.
Welcome back to Reptile TV. This is an Asian water dragon, or Chinese water dragon, but these guys are very cool and they're extremely fast. Now, the thing I like about water dragons is they have extremely cool color, and down here by his throat, you can actually see a lot of pink and different colors. And right now he's just cranky because we woke him up. Now, these guys are going to eat lots and lots of bugs, and occasionally, if you have the right setup, you can even watch these guys fish. They're actually really good fishers. Now, where these guys come from in Asia, it's a very humid area, so these guys like a lot of humidity and a lot of water, and they do look very similar to an iguana, and they also have a third eye. So that third eye is once again used for making sure that nothing coming over the top, as you see like that, he can see the shadows moving, so he's getting scared that a predator is going to come after him, which nothing here is going to hurt this guy today.
No, we like water dragons. So, water dragons need a pretty sizable enclosure, and they're mostly arboreal, so you need a vertical cage rather than a horizontal cage, with lots of places to climb and a large bowl of water so they can get in the water. You need 5.0 UVB. That UVB and UVA is really, really important for these guys. They need to be about 85 degrees, so you'll need a heat lamp as well. And really high humidity, about 80% humidity. So get friendly with that spray bottle.
Another thing about these guys is variety in food is very important for these guys for their coloration, and also to make sure that these guys have enough protein to survive and get large enough. These guys will also occasionally be found eating vegetables and fruits. It's kind of rare to have that happen in captivity, but I do have a friend whose Chinese water dragon actually loves strawberries, but he's also the one who likes to go fishing. He has a huge enclosure for him, and these guys will actually swim down and chase the fish, which is kind of fun to watch these guys do. So if you're thinking of a cool lizard that you have a decent sized aquarium for, that you want something that's just going to be really fun and you can really work and play with the environment, have some water features, have a lot of climbing, this will be a great one for you guys, because these guys need a lot of stuff in their environment, which makes them a fun one for husbandry. So when you're setting the tank up, you can do all kinds of things and just make it super involved so that these guys don't get bored in their enclosure. Hope you guys like this one. We'll be right back with Reptiles on Reptile TV.
Reptile TV is brought to you by Scales and Tails, 3 Denver locations on the Front Range, also in Castle Rock, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs. Visit scalesandtails.com.
At any of our Scales and Tails locations, you can get what we use and recommend to everyone out there. Our favorite product, ZoomEd. You can get all the lighting, all the bedding, anything you need from ZoomEd. They are the best in reptile care.
We use and love ZoomEd.
Where can you go to find the best in exotic animals? Scales and Tails, turtles, pythons, frogs, lizards, sugar gliders, reptiles the zoo doesn't even have, and much more. Scales and Tails is your one-stop shop, including feeders and a full line of supplies to keep your animal happy, with a knowledgeable staff to answer all of your questions. The displays at Scales and Tails are so cool, they should charge admission. Scales and Tails, where reptiles rule.
At any of our Scales and Tails locations, you can get what we use and recommend to everyone out there. Our favorite product, ZoomEd. You can get all the lighting, all the bedding, anything you need from ZoomEd. They are the best in reptile care.
We use and love ZoomEd.
Where can you go to find the best in exotic animals? Scales and tails, turtles, pythons, frogs, lizards, sugar gliders, reptiles the zoo doesn't even have, and much more. Scales and Tails is your one-stop shop, including feeders and a full line of supplies to keep your animal happy, with a knowledgeable staff to answer all of your questions. The displays at Scales and Tails are so cool, they should charge admission. Scales and Tails, where reptiles rule.
Welcome back to Reptile TV. This is a leopard gecko. The cool thing about leopard geckos is this is one of the lizards that makes everyone think that all lizards can regenerate their tails, because these guys do. But when these guys lose their tail, which this one has not done, their tail never grows back the same. This guy, if he were to lose his tail, you wouldn't see these nice little lines through here or the bumps. And also, it would never really come back to a point. It would be shorter and more fat and really smooth, so it wouldn't have the bumps and ridges. Now, the reason they drop that tail is so that if a predator comes up and tries to eat them, well, that tail will fall off, wiggle, this guy will run away. The predator might get a little bit of food there, but it's not going to get the whole lizard. So these guys will regenerate their tails to try to stay alive and defend themselves against other animals.
So leopard geckos are found in the Middle East in deserts, Pakistan and Afghanistan, places over there. They're actually a nocturnal species, so when you're keeping them, they don't need UVB or UVA light. They just need a heat lamp where they can get pretty toasty. They like to be 85 to 90 degrees. Leopard geckos you can keep in a 10 to 20 gallon aquarium, so they don't need a lot of space. And they're actually a really good beginner lizard because they're so easy to take care of, and they're really, really docile and easy to handle.
Another thing I like about leopard geckos is they're actually a very clean lizard. In their enclosures, you will often find that these guys will only go to a bathroom in one area of their tank. They don't want to be running around in their feces, so they try to stay very clean and keep it in one section. These guys love hiding spots though, so I always recommend having plenty of hides. Not just one, multiples usually work really well with these guys. Now, if you're ever having a problem with these guys shedding, because when they shed, they like to eat their skin. It helps save the protein. Now, if you're ever having a problem with these guys shed, if that happens, they can lose their little toes. So you always want to make sure you have humidity in their hide spot. I usually recommend putting like a sphagnum moss in there and keeping it just a little bit moist, which will definitely help them with their sheds. Because even though they're from the desert, they stay buried in the sand where it's a little more humid and will help them shed. So that's why I recommend putting some moss in there to kind of simulate the environment of where they're from. These guys are insectivores, so they love bugs. These guys love little mealworms. They love crickets. And these guys, they don't have to eat every single day because they actually store all their fat back here in their tail. So these guys are definitely an easier pet and, like she said, a great beginner. For someone who's looking to get into the reptile hobby, this is usually what I'd recommend as a great starter pet.
Leopard geckos also breed really, really well in captivity, and you can get all kinds of color morphs. This one right here is called a caramel albino, and he's got this lovely yellow and brown coloring, but you can get everything from bright orange and red all the way to yellow and white and albinos. There's just all kinds of color morphs, and they're super easy to breed. You can pick these up at just about any pet store. They're really common and really available.
The other great thing about these guys is this is as big as they get. They don't usually get any bigger than this, so they are a smaller pet and they're easy to handle. They're not really jumpy, they're not really fast, so they're definitely a great beginner's handler type species. So it's a good one to keep as a pet.
Thanks for checking out Leopard Gecko. See you next time on Reptile TV. Welcome back to Reptile TV. This here is a rosy boa. It's pretty cool because it's one of only 2 boids that are found native in the United States. You can find them out in California and in the deserts.
These guys also go pretty far south down into Mexico. Now these guys are pretty cool, but they are a terrestrial species of boa. These guys like to burrow underground and find little rodents and everything hiding. Now, the other thing about this rosy boa is this one's actually an albino. So you wouldn't really see this guy out in the wild, but it is a very pretty specimen, and this is about as big as they get. They don't get much bigger than this. So it's definitely an easy snake to take care of, and because it's smaller, it doesn't require a huge enclosure. Now, with these guys, a lot of times people will use aspen bedding or like a reptibark bedding to let these guys just kind of burrow underneath it easily, and they don't require a whole bunch of humidity. Now the cool thing about this guy is that, well, even though they have a smaller head, these guys do still constrict their prey. So you actually see these guys squeezing rodents, and they eat about every 7 to 10 days. Being a little bit fatter, they are pretty strong, and they don't move as quick as some of your other boas or colubrids like a corn snake or anything, so they can be a pretty easy snake to handle.
So for a rosy boa, you're going to need about a 20-gallon aquarium, pretty deep bedding, and a heat lamp so that they can get to about 85 degrees.
You'll also find these guys somewhat soaking themselves in the water dish, so I always recommend a dish that's big enough for any snake that it can fit its whole body in, so that it can soak when it needs to. But these guys don't need a whole bunch of humidity, which makes them a great carrying snake, so you don't have to worry about misting constantly or anything like that. The other cool thing about rosy boas is, well, these guys have a really smooth scale pattern, so it's actually almost feels like you're touching leather. Unlike some other snakes that might have a more rough scale pattern, this guy has a really nice tight scale pattern.
They're also called rubber boas for that reason.
Well, thank you for watching this episode of Reptile TV. Catch us every Saturday at 7 a.m. on your favorite channel, Channel 3 KCDO.